All right, artists, picking back up where we left off from last week, grab your embroidery floss and your embroidery needle, and we're going to go ahead and talk about creating these spaces on our ugly doll that we maybe don't use an extra piece of felt for, but we can actually stitch on with our embroidery floss. So I'm going to start up here. I'm going to show you on my eye. You might want to go ahead and take a pen and mark off exactly where you're going to be having your embroidery floss go through for your shape. So for instance, I have an X up here for my eye. I might want to go ahead and put an X on my ugly doll. And then when I grab my embroidery floss, I know exactly where it needs to go. Now, we're going to be doing a running stitch, which is exactly what we did last week. So we're going to go from the back to the front, from the front to the back. And you're going to keep doing that along the line that you have made for your shape. Once you're done, remember, go to the back and make a knot so that your embroidery floss stays in place where it is supposed to be. Okay, now I'm going to show you here on my mouth. I'm going to be doing the same process. This time I'm not going to have a line that I draw, but remember, you can always go with your pen and draw that on first so it's a little bit easier for you to follow. So here I am. I'm using a different color embroidery floss. I'm using some blue, and I'm going to first start with my straight line with my running stitch. So remember, from the back to the front, from the back, or from the front to the back, okay? And then when I get to my tooth, instead of putting an extra piece of felt, I'm just going to do that same shape. So I'm going to make a little triangle here, and that's going to be my tooth that is connected to my mouth, and I did it all with the stitch for my embroidery floss. Once you have all of your pieces together for the front of your ugly doll, guess what? It's going to be time to go ahead and get them together, the front and the back. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to make sure that I have them perfectly lined up. Then I'm going to take these little extra needles I'm going to put them into place. All right, so I'm going to stick them so that it holds my front to my back piece, and then when I start to stitch, they'll stay together. So now I'm going to grab my embroidery floss. Again, make sure that you put it through your needle. And this time, instead of doing a running stitch, I'm going to do what we call a whip stitch. Now the whip stitch, again, we are going to start from the back, pull to the front, but then guess what? Instead of going from front to the back, we're going to go back to the back through the front again. So you're going to keep going back to front, back to front, back to front. And it's going to make a really tight stitch that pulls them together. Watch as I do this. You'll definitely want to make sure that you do your stitches also pretty close together. All right, this way when we go and we add our stuffing in, no stuffing will be peeking through and falling out of our ugly doll. Once we've gotten maybe from about the bottom, about halfway up on our sides, we're actually going to pause for a minute. So remember, go to the back, tie off a knot, and we're going to grab some stuffing. So we're going to get some of this little fill that we're going to start to put into our ugly doll. This is what's going to help create it into a soft sculpture, okay? Now, after you've put a little bit in, go ahead, get your needle, get your embroidery floss, and it's going to be time for us to continue stitching. This time, we're gonna go, again, up through the top, all right, but we're gonna leave a little hole, either on the side or it can be at the top, because we're gonna add more of our stuffing inside after we have gone almost all the way around. Time to add the stuffing. Oh my goodness, look how cute it's looking. Okay, so now I've got my stuffing inside here, and I can always use my pencil or some other maybe thin object to push some stuffing into some smaller spots. You can see here on my wings, I definitely need to make sure that I have something that can help poke it inside there. Okay, but now I've got to close that hole. So once I have enough stuffing inside of my ugly doll, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my floss and my needle, and I'm going to stitch up with my whip stitch that last part. So again, our whip stitch, we go from the back to the front, from the back to the front. That is different from our running stitch. Our running stitch, we can go back, front, back. And it creates that dotted line, but this stitch actually makes it so that it holds your two pieces in together, sort of wraps them and connects them. Oh my goodness, friends, would you look how cute my ugly doll soft sculpture is. I have fully finished all of my whip stitching, and it is stuffed. And I think this looks pretty ugly. And by ugly, I mean awesome and unique. Can't wait to see what yours look like, artists.